I cannot believe that they did not take me out sooner in this gameplay, and today we are showcasing the Badger. Now this is a tank that I've got a love-hate relationship with, because remember that this comes off of a vehicle that I quite enjoy playing at tier 9, but the key thing is that the Badger coming from the Tortoise is supposed to be a heavily armoured version of the Tortoise that gets 440 alpha as opposed to 400 alpha, and therefore should be able to do more damage per minute. It should be able to get into position, it should have the chance to block a few thousand damage in your games, but unfortunately that's not always the case. Now we're showcasing a replay where actually this tank does start to perform, and these are the gameplays that I love having, where you take a tank that isn't usually known as a very kind of overpowered, or at least everyone knows about the Badger. You hit it in the lower plate, you get around the side of it, you can take it out really easily, but I actually found that playing this tank on Pilsen, although Pilsen being a good map for this tank, you can see in the mini-map that the team are just taking a fat steaming dump as opposed to really doing what they should be doing. They're all just sat in the base. I have no idea what's going on. We shut down, or actually just knocked down that barrier in front of, or the door to the factory straight ahead of us, so that if anyone pushes there we can at least get an early shot of damage, and then we can pull back. Hopefully, by pulling back, our team are going to be able to help us out and deal some damage to those opponents that may or may not push. Now, I know that I'm probably going to have a bad game here, and so I think, let's just try and maximise the damage I can get. You know, if you're going to have one of these, then I'm not going to be able to run at this point. There wasn't anywhere really that is better to run in this point, unless I was to, you know, have started off the game and gone on the other flank in the first place, which, granted, I probably should have done, but we didn't, and we're actually in this position. So how can we make use of it? Well, you're seeing here that actually this position isn't awful. And why is that? Well, it's down to the fact that we can angle up this little sloped area, and a lot of heavy tanks and people that have played on Pilsen for any length of time will know about it, but it's super easy to do, and you can see how quickly we can rack up damage. Now we're playing against the tier 9 version of ourselves. Granted, we bounced off of him, which is kind of annoying, but at the same time we're able to be annoying to the enemy team. You can see here we've got, what, like 4 vehicles directly in front of us, and don't worry, it's going to get even worse as this game pushes on. Unfortunately, the 60 TP on the enemy team does not pen, but then ends up breaking my gun, so we have to use the repair kit. And when you have used your repair kit in the Badger, it means that if anyone then subsequently tracks you, it's going to be a pain. Now, luckily we're in a nice position here to be able to at least bounce a few rounds, and I'm thinking, come on team, there's a Object 430 YOLO in me, hopefully they'll support me. And actually they did to a degree, but one thing that is yet again annoying is that the enemy Type 5s appear out of nowhere. Now, even with the damage per minute the Badger does have in this game, it's still annoying to come up against a Type 5 because of the fact that, you know, you're going to have to deal a considerable amount of damage against these Type 5s. You're going to have to fire premium, and when your team aren't really giving you as much support as you might hope, and with things like the 60 TP on the enemy team trying to push, and of course this tank is going to get me taken out at some point if he does decide to actually turn in a different direction. And unfortunately for me, things like the Type 5 don't really have to care about actually aiming at us, and it just derps me down to no health. But you saw there a classic example of, you know, your team have done bad, your team have gone in a weird position, but we were able to hold off, what, like 6 vehicles all at once. We managed to take out 2 of them, and we managed to actually deal a significant damage to the rest of them and make it super difficult, hold them all up, and our team were actually able to take a bad position, which should never really work on Pilsen, and still come away with a win. So a fantastic one to showcase that even in a bad matchup, in a tank that isn't particularly the most carryable, if you find yourself in positions like you're seeing here, you can still do really good, and hopefully that comes across in this first clip. So let's jump into the next one, where maybe this sort of position doesn't quite happen. The next game that we do have is on Fisherman's Bay. Now, Fisherman's Bay, a good map in its own right, in terms of having flexibility for all tank types. You know, if you're a heavy, you can go in the town, or you can push on the one line. Alternatively, you can also, if you're a medium, you can go in the middle, you can use your gun depression, you can even snipe on the left. You know, there's loads of things you can do. TDs can also do the similar sort of thing, sniping, that sort of stuff. Or you can play mid. Light tanks can spot mid, and of course sit in a bush somewhere if you want to play passive. So there's a lot of things you can do on Fisherman's Bay, which make it a map that I kind of really enjoy playing. Sometimes it can be annoying, but at the same time, if you're able to consistently kind of push vehicles, then yeah, you can have some really good results. And if you've played any length of games, you'll know that the middle of Fisherman's Bay is kind of the determinant as to whether or not you end up kind of winning a lot of games on this map, or maybe you end up losing because you haven't taken control of that central section. You can see here the TANK having a bit of trouble, going to be able to pen us, and unfortunately for him, he's back in the garage pretty quickly within only a minute and a half of the game starting. So really nice start to the game, but can this continue throughout the game in the Badger? Now the Badger, as we all know, once again at the beginning we talked about the frontal armor being pretty okay. You can bounce some rounds, let's not I guess say that it has absolute butter armor, but at the same time, like, as soon as people start loading premium, your frontal armor, which the tank prides itself on, becomes butter, so people will be able to just pen you every single day of the week. And anyone with any level of skill will know how to be able to take out a Badger. You have the lower plate, you've got the side armor, you've got the idea that you could just track the thing and get around it if possible, if you're in an open map. You've got artillery that are going to bear down on you. Luckily we don't have any in this game, but all of these things combined into one mean that you are at a significant disadvantage when you come to trying to carry in this thing. It's not particularly the easiest tank to carry with. A lot of the time, you know, you sacrifice your mobility. The tank isn't the fastest. I mean, none of the non-turreted TDs are particularly that fast. Even the broken ones that are broken on PC, in the form of like the Object 268 version 4, which is actually not very fast on console. Surprise, surprise. They basically nerfed it into oblivion before introducing it. So yeah, I don't have a problem with that, by the way. It's just that typically, you know, the more armor that your tank has, the slower it is, and of course, the more armor your tank destroyer has, the lower the DPM or the big gun that you usually have, and so you have to rely upon like putting out consistent damage as the Badger does. So the 440 on the Badger makes it quite nice. You can trade with a lot of heavy tanks, and also the fact that you reload so quick. Even things like the E100 will be absolutely crying if you can manage to string along a few hits, as 440 adds up and stacks up really nicely. And actually, if you compare it to some autoloaders, the reload difference between this and maybe like a 57 heavy is not like completely bad. Like, you are not actually that much longer like intricate reload as a 57 heavy. Now granted, it is like double the time, but when you consider that this is a like a firer that you can fire all of the time, it's not a clip, you know, you've got that really nice advantage in those regards. So you have to make use of the positioning within World of Tanks to make the Badger work 100%. And if you were having one of those days where maybe you just can't be arsed to really like think all too much, the Badger, it's probably not for you. So I wouldn't recommend playing this tank if you are kind of trying to have like a chill game or just relax. It's not particularly that sort of tank. You do have to be very good at like managing where you're going to be. Don't get me wrong, you know, you can still have games where you don't really have to think a ton, but they do come across a lot less in this vehicle than you would have in something else that you can easily kind of not have to think. Now, this replay so far, we've had 2,300 damage, we've blocked 2,600, so obviously the armor does work. You know, it's mainly from range at which the armor will work best, and of course people that don't know the weak points, which is quite a few surprisingly, so considering that yes, the tank does indeed follow the pattern of having that lower plate weak point. Yeah, I'm surprised that people don't take advantage of it more. There is no real visible cupola that you can quite easily pen, so there's that to it as well. But you saw there, as soon as you expose the side armour and you don't realise that maybe there's an autoloader to your side, you're going to get absolutely steam hammed and you're going to end up back in the garage. Unfortunately for the 50B, he does that instead of us because we managed to set him on fire. So already 4,000 damage, and this is the typical, like genuinely the typical game in the Badger. You're able to dish out hundreds and thousands of damage in multiple games as you go through, and you can come away with results that are just insane. And the good thing that I've always enjoyed about this tank is that, you know, if you play it right, if you kind of got your brain clicked in the right direction and you're knowing what to do in certain positions, you can make this tank really work, and it does. And that's what I really find super fun to play about the Badger as opposed to some of the other tanks. And granted, you know, some of the other tank destroyers at tier 10 will probably get penned more, even though you're looking at things like Jaegerus. You know, the problem with this tank is that sheer penetration values just ruin it. So if you come up against like a Jaegeru, I mean, even things like an ISU 152 will kind of butter this tank, to be honest, if they know where to aim. So I'm very conscious when I was pushing this guy to not expose all too much. But either way, a really nice, easy, quick games that I wanted to showcase the Badger, but also the positioning and knowing when to push, when to fall back, and how you can maximise damage in a losing game. This one hopefully gave you that opportunity to have a look, and of course 2 fantastic replays that I enjoyed playing. And thank you very much for watching this video. Don't forget to check out some of the others on the channel, and I'll give you a cookie if you do actually watch one of those that's on screen right now. There's a gameplay and tank reviews as well, playlists.